Welcome back to AP U.S. History. This is Chapter 11, Part 5. Uh, we've just finished talking about the Trail of Tears and the fact that the Native Americans east of the Mississippi were forced onto the Indian Territory, which is now the present-day state of Oklahoma. Many died on this trek to Oklahoma, but not too many people were concerned about that. In the meanwhile, there are Americans who have moved to Texas, which is controlled by Mexico. Um, if you remember, the U.S. abandoned the claim to Texas when they bought Florida from Spain in 1819. Now, in the meantime, Spain is going to be kicked out of Mexico, and there's going to be a new government established there. Um, in 1823, Stephen Austin and other Americans got the right to settle Texas. Um, Here's again a picture of the Trail of Tears. Not a shining moment. He professed to love Native Americans, but didn't quite live up to that. Well, anyway, the Texans, or people in America, uh, went to Texas, and the Mexican government said that they could come there if they would agree to become Catholics and that they would become loyal citizens of the new Mexican government. Now, most of the Americans pretty much ignored uh, these stipulations. They just came with their slaves, came with their families, and settled in eastern part of Texas and the northern part of Texas. Now, friction is going to develop between the Mexican government and American settlers over the issue of slavery, immigration, and local rights. Um, the Mexican government is going to outlaw slaves in 1830. Now, there were a number of slaves brought in by these white settlers, and this is going to rub them the wrong way. Um, and they're going to decide, the Mexican government is going to decide that, we're not all that sure that we want more Americans to settle our land. We're not exactly sure that they're loyal to us. So these things developing certainly causes friction between the Mexican government and the people in Texas. Uh, Little snafu there. Anyway, uh, so they decide that more Americans is not to come to Mexico. Texans refuse to abide by the Mexican decree, and more American settlers come, and slavery continues in Texas by these Americans. Now, Santa Anna, who is the dictator of Mexico, outlawed all local rights and raised an army to exert his control over Texas. So he doesn't really believe that these Texans, they're supposed to be Mexican citizens, and whatever they're doing is illegal. Because of this, Texas declares its independence in 1836. Now, Santa Anna will not take kindly to this, and he will march to put down this rebellion, this revolution. Texans defeat Santa Anna forces at San Jacinto, and Mexico will lose its control over Texas, or a good share of it. And so the Texans are going to fight for their independence. This is a picture of Santa Anna. And eventually at San Jacinto, he's going to surrender. Uh, and Texas will become a sovereign nation. One of the things that Jackson did immediately after Texas became a sovereign nation was to recognize it as a sovereign nation. Immediately the Texans, it's nice to be an independent country, but we'd really like to be part of the United States. Unfortunately, there's going to be a group of people in the northern states who will defeat their petition and said, we really don't want Texas to come in because that'll just be another slave state. So Texas was left to protect herself, and it will remain a republic for a number of years. Their first president was Sam Houston, um, but Texas really wants to be part of the United States and eventually will come into the Union later on. Now, the election of 1836 is interesting because Jackson decides that he's not going to run again a third term. He selects Martin Van Buren as his predecessor. Uh, he will Van Buren will run against William Henry Harrison and Hugh Lawson White. William Henry Harrison is going to be a Whig. The Whig Party is going to develop because of their dislike for Jackson. So factions are going to appear. Henry Clay and Calhoun joined forces, and this is some other things that are going on during this time. Uh, Now, these two men will be responsible for forming the Whig Party. They were the ones that were against Jackson removing funds from the bus to pet banks. And so they don't really like Jackson too much. Of course, you know that Calhoun, he didn't take too kindly to being told he's going to be hung at the tree in South Carolina. And Henry Clay didn't like the fact that the Mayville Road was vetoed. And because there's a feud that seems to go on between Jackson and Clay. Now, many of the ideas that will become the foundation for the modern day Republican Party. So the Federalists die out and the Whigs will appear, and from the Whigs we will get the Republicans. Now, William Henry Harrison became the Whig candidate after defeating Clay in the primary. So Clay was still thinking about becoming president of the United States. Martin Van Buren will run on the Democratic ticket, and Jackson is certainly behind him. After the election is held, Van Buren is declared the winner, and he will win the election by a wide margin. Although he will be blamed for the panic of 1837, it really is Jackson's responsibility. Now, in terms of seeing what Jackson actually did as presidency, you have to keep in mind that there really isn't much going on in terms of foreign affairs. Most of whatever happens is things that happen within the borders of the United States. Some positive things that he exhibited while he was president, certainly during the tariff controversy in 1832, he kept the Union together. He forced the hand of South Carolina to rescind their nullification action, and was going to use force if necessary to keep the Union together. He can be seen as a champion of the common man in the sense that he did things like rotation of office and the spoils system to ensure that people had a voice in government. This shows the election results of 1836, and you can see that Van Buren won by a large margin. Now getting back to Jackson, firmly established the Democratic Party, pushed for a strong union. So there are some things that are remarkable about the man. Certainly wasn't a stupid man, although he didn't have a lot of formal education. He certainly has leadership, and he exhibited that throughout his life. Now, in terms of liabilities, well, maybe if you say that people have a right to be in politics, that's one thing. The spoil system, well, we're going to give you federal jobs if you support me in my candidacy. Well, maybe that breeds corruption. He did kill the Bank of the United States, which caused a lot of failures in America, and we're going to plummet into an economic crisis. Specie circular certainly hurt the Western farmers because they lacked the money to buy the land because they didn't get the gold. Flaunted this authority of the Supreme Court in the Cherokee case, Worcester versus Georgia, and also the vetoing Buss and saying it was unconstitutional when the Supreme Court said it was unconstitutional. The Trail of Tears, certainly that was a blight on his presidency, a lot of human misery and destruction. As far as Van Buren is concerned, he's just a one-term wonder. He furthered the spoils system, established the independent treasury system to make sure that federal government monies were placed in pet banks that were using sound banking practices. He's going to be blamed for the Panic of 1837, which was one of the worst in American history. What caused that? Basically over speculation, poor banking practices. People couldn't pay back their loans. What triggered this probably was the banks in England saying that they wanted to be paid in gold. They didn't want American dollars. And all of a sudden it's a house of cards, and banks throughout the United States are going to fail. The panic, you can see here how it spread, destroying banks and the economy. And this is all blamed on Van Buren. And so people lost confidence in banking. Lots of banks collapsed. And a lot of the federal deposits in the banks were lost forever. Factories closed. It was an unemployment soared. The Whigs will use this as a springboard to win the next election, because they will believe in this American system. They want banks and credit. They want an expansion of that, higher tariffs, internal improvements. And they believe that that would ease the crisis. Van Buren was convinced that the federal money was being lost due to many private banks, and so that's why he came up with the Treasury Bill in 1840 to put the federal deposits in safer place. Whigs condemned the policy, said that it was causing a hardship on America because there wasn't enough money available. As a result, William Harrison will win the next presidency, and we'll stop there.